Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 78 of Storyteller Conclaves. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you are a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
Should I answer that?
Not really.
Okay, fair enough.
I kind of know how you're doing.
HIPAA violations and all?
HIPAA violations and all. Just hopes for your health.
Thank you. Thank you.
I, on the other hand, I'm just going to monopolize this one.
Go for it.
I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
For the first damn time in a while.
Well, you've been on an upswing for, I would say, at least the last 5 days.
Yeah.
Like, you worked on your game. You found some really great tools, which I know you're going to gab about for at least a few minutes here.
At least a few minutes, yeah.
You showed me some of them, which is great. You found one that I've been working with and now have coveted it and started using it as your own, which is great.
Not only that, but Sean got it too.
Yeah,
so we're just working together to do
that's
all
great.
sorts of
You can
mayhem
show
with it.
me later.
Yes.
So, but tell me a little bit about some of the new stuff you got.
All right, so I spent a little bit of money. I picked up Foundry VTT,
Which is the one I've got, and I've been learning slowly.
Yeah, so Foundry VTT, and we talked about it a little bit. It is it's $50 for a license, but it's a one-time purchase.
Yes.
And it is it's a program that runs directly on your PC. But that
or Linux
just runs right, but on your computer anyways.
Yeah.
And it runs the VTT server there. And then rather than any of your players having to purchase software themselves and install it, you can log right in through a web browser.
Which is nice.
And it has a live browser interface on it.
It looks really good. It moves very smoothly. For all intents and purposes, it's like having your own personal Roll20.
Yeah, exactly. It's like your own Roll20, but I think it looks better. It looks
more
smoother.
Yeah, it's polished.
The big draw for me was that if you have a bunch of stuff on D&D Beyond like I do, there are tools that you can download, like plugins for Foundry, that will allow you to import stuff from D&D Beyond.
Not only D&D Beyond, but they've got campaign settings for Shadowrun, for 7C, for all kinds of stuff.
I was astounded to see all the different games you could play in there. There was Savage Worlds was in there. They even had Honey Heist,
which is crazy.
Which is absolutely crazy. Yeah.
So, but it's very flexible, very versatile, and for $50, you really can't get around that. So, I've thought about doing a comparative, review YouTube channel that goes along with our stuff that includes this kind of thing. Maybe we'll get into it next year, but I don't have the spoons to throw at that right now.
Yeah, no, I barely have enough spoons to get my own game back up and running. And
exactly.
I'm kind of capitalizing on that right now, so I find myself with a handful of spoons, so I'm trying to run with it as much as possible.
No, I would definitely do it. So
the other thing that I picked up was being that I do have Foundry VTT now, and you can do cool stuff like blocking off things on your maps to define where walls and windows and doors and stuff like that are, so that you can have true fog of war in your maps, just like I think Roll20 does that as well.
Roll20 does it, but one of the things that I liked about VTT is it's not just fog of war. You have two different terrain types. You have walls, and then you have terrain wall.
Right.
And the terrain wall gives you a little different view of things than your just typical walls, which is neat. It's different.
Yeah. So to get some of that stuff set up, I needed good maps to go along with it. Now, I've been working with Incarnate for a while, but I find that Incarnate, to make things like dungeon maps and like village maps and stuff, that you've got to kind of fight it a little bit.
It's more for world maps more than anything else.
It's phenomenal for world maps, but not great for the nitty-gritty down to the square sort of stuff. So what I picked up was actually Dungeon Fog.
Yeah.
And this is actually some software I had not heard about before.
Gesundheit.
Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. It was a software I'd not heard about before, but I did some quick searches and whatnot. And you can make some really high-quality maps. They've got a lot of really great assets. You can do some stuff for free, but you really unlock the good features when you pay for it. It was $50 for a year subscription, but you can do it on the month. for I think like $5 a month or something like that. If you just want to, jot down a quick couple maps and then save your money.
And then I mean, and the maps that you were showing me are similar to some of the ones that are out there on Patreon that creators create. Now, I'm not saying that what the creators are doing is basically just doing it this way. They look very similar, but there's two creators that I follow, and I mean, the stuff they create is unique. It's beautiful. I'm not a creative sort in that sense. Like, I can create a map, but I'm not going to get to the level of creation that some of these people do.
Right.
I mean, you inherently are a creative painter. You have an eye for that kind of thing, and love doing, basically interior design when you do maps and things like that. I am not good at that, so I will pay someone $1 a month to give me a stack of maps, or $5 to give me a whole, girth of maps.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
It's totally worth it for me. Totally worth it for me.
I had some particular things in mind for exactly what I wanted out of this map, and so I did look through some existing ones already that were like freely available, and I was like, those are good like inspiration sources, but they're not what I'm looking for.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to describe the scene the way that I've got it laid out, and then show you guys this map and have it be the same thing.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
So yeah, I found Dungeon Fog, and that's been working out really great. And lastly, I've been actually playing around with I can't believe this is the first time I've gotten into this, because I was actually part of the Kickstarter,
right?
Along with you, was a Hero Forge.
Oh God, yeah.
Hero Forge has their color options for their minis out now.
Yes.
And so their hero building online web interface has the ability to colorize those minis right there in the window.
Yes.
And you don't necessarily have to purchase them or anything like that, but what you can do is put characters together as an elaborate character builder and get full color, just take a screenshot of it. And you've got instant character references for characters you've created just, off the bat.
Yeah, it's a nice way of doing it. Another thing that's really good for that is that this will be a good going forward for people who just want to do headshots, which is great. Yeah, because a lot of times you'll want one of those as like a token or something like that you can use in other games, and I could see you using those in BTT really easily. So.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was doing with them. Was I took, not only did I take screenshots so I could post them in Discord so you guys could see what your characters look like for this upcoming one shot, but I also took those same screenshots and kind of zoomed in on them a little bit, and then I made little tokens for the VTT for you guys. So, yeah, it's actually kind of all coming together. I've got a lot of things working all in all. My game is, or I should say my session 0 for my game is this Sunday. And this will be the first time we're playing since March?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Right before the pandemic hit. So yeah, it's good to be back in the saddle, and I'm finally feeling confident about where I'm at and have the spoons to throw my game together. So I just feel good about that all around.
Yep. So do you want to get into this topic?
I think we should.
Okay. So we're talking about props tonight, and we're not just talking about giving your DM props. We're talking about actual physical props.
I mean, always give your DM props.
Always give your DM props because they deserve
Slurpees.
It. It depends. Sometimes she likes her Sour Patch things. So, but always give your DM props, or them, however the case may be. But physical props are fun. It's something you can add into a game to add a lot of flavor to it and to get people a little more interested. I mean, a lot of people get very animated when they're doing their rolling and talking about what something is, but there are people who sometimes can't. They can't get into the moment, and it's hard. But when you bring something physical to the space, and people will agree with this, if you've ever done like a what is it, the mystery rooms, or where you got to get yourself unlocked out of them, or find escape rooms. Those kind of rooms have that feel. They're putting you in the element, and naturally you're now attached to it, and it makes the whole experience better.
Yeah, and I think for anybody who's ever experienced live action role play, LARP, before, you kind of understand what the difference between at tabletop role-playing, where everything's kind of in the theater of the mind's eye, and when you actually have some physical things to look at and experience, and how that instantly starts drawing you in, I know you and I both played this exact same LARP.
Yeah.
Back in the day. I played also for a brief time in the one that Sean was involved in as well.
And I also I LARPed Vampire, which I think you did as well.
We both LARPed Vampire.
Yeah, different places, but yeah.
But it's strange that, you know, when you do have just even the bare minimum of props and maybe a little bit of costuming going on, like even someone coming out with you know, green face paint and a sword, and you're like, oh, that's an orc.
Yeah.
You know, and instantly your brain just kind of latches on to, like, I know what that is. That's an orc. Like, I have to treat it like it's an orc. You know?
Yep.
And it stops being, you know, Bob wearing wearing green face
wearing
paint,
a sash on him,
wearing a sash on him that says orc. You know.
Yeah.
And it becomes a very real experience for you because what it does is it bridges the gap in your suspension of disbelief.
Yes.
You know. So let's go to the beginning.
Okay.
We always like to start these discussions with a definition.
Yes.
So what is a prop?
It's a physical object that represents something in your story to help them either convey a visual cue or serve as a reminder, or something of importance.
Yes, exactly.
Some kind of presence.
Keep in mind too that, like, basically anything can be a prop. Okay?
I mean, technically, minis and terrain is props.
Oh, absolutely, they are, because they're physical representations of the things in your game. You know, and you could explain all day what the battlefield looks like, but it's another thing to just put a board down in front of them, slap a couple pieces of terrain and some minis on it, and be like, that's what it looks like.
And then when they find loot, literally take a little piece of, like, a little chest and put it down there.
Yeah,
and boom, now you have loot. And now there's loot there.
Little pile of coins, and boom, there you go.
Exactly.
But it can also be just the little incidental stuff. Like we've talked about doing things like handwritten notes before.
Oh yeah, I've done them a few times.
Yeah, you've done them a few times. You guys had you were looking for some literature from the Mages Guild, and so I printed out some in-game books and gave them to you guys. They were just like little, you know, like 2-3 page things.
But it still was neat.
But it was a little thing, and I put like a drop cap on it and like some nice little printed font. I was gonna do the tea staining, but it didn't work. I didn't know how to do it right, you know. But you know, things like that, those are pretty common props. But other things I've seen are things like keys, tokens or trinkets of little, you know, baubles you might find. Small boxes are typically are pretty common because you can find some really, like, ornate things and hide treasures inside of them. So like the key I mentioned earlier, you know, you might find an antique key and put it inside a little antique box. Yeah. And that might be what they find in game. Yeah.
I saw once where the group had gotten into a crypt, and they needed to get a ring, a signet ring, off of somebody after basically, you know, getting through their guards and stuff. And they get to the chamber where the person is, and they're like, "So, is there undead here?" "No, just a sarcophagus." "Oh, yep, you got to open it." So they open the sarcophagus, and then the person literally puts on the table an arm, a bony arm with like little bits of goo on it and the ring on it. So they had to go and reach, and they had to decide who at the table was going to grab it.
Oh, man.
And he had put like little bits of like Jello, almost like, or gel stuff on it. So it looked like old city, and they were like, "Oh God, I'm not touching that."
Oh,
like,
yeah.
But you're the healer. You've dealt with that. You dealt with like life, not death. That's death. That's different. Like, and those kind of things change the moment up.
I saw some really amazing prop use and I talk a lot about the Geek and Sundry production of Dread.
Oh yes,
Sagas of Sundry.
Yes.
And they did like some like brackish water with some just like nasty stuff floating around in it, and they had to like dig in there and find the key that had fallen into the quote unquote well. And it was just like a bucket that they had to reach into, but you know, it was that like Halloween party level of like, you know, peeled grapes for eyeballs sort of thing.
Yep.
Oh, it was so gross, but it was so cool.
No, and that's what we're talking about. Is, I mean, yeah, you can get lighting and sound effects and fog machines,
and those things are also
and
props.
Put costumes. Those are all props, but there's littler other things that you can throw together that are simpler than those, and there are considerations you have to worry about as well.
Oh, sure.
You can go a little crazy,
and we'll get into that.
Going crazy can go a bit far.
So why are props important? And I think this is the main crux of our discussion right here is I mean, we can define a lot of different things as props, but why should you use props in your game?
I think for me, the first thing that comes into my mind is getting the spark out of people.
Yeah.
You want to start that fire of, we're playing a game, we're in a moment together, and you want to give it some life of its own, from away from the paper, away from the dice, away from the pens, away from the tablets, and add something more to it to give them that. And that's where like doing voices and stuff helps. But if you have a little help behind that, sometimes it adds that spark to it.
Yeah, it bridges, like I said, it bridges that suspension of disbelief for you.
Very much
you
so.
know, you don't have to imagine something that is physically sitting in front of you.
Very much so. Very much so.
And you know, it also helps too. Like some objects really defy description. In a lot of ways. I mean, you could sit there and describe the intricate gold filigree on something, you know, or the intricacies of this, you know, dragon crest or something like that. But you could just put it in front of them and just be like, it looks like this. And it saves you so much time and energy, and it also makes it so much real. It's a win-win situation.
Very much so.
You know.
Very much so. You know, ornamental armor pieces and or signets and markings. Anytime you can, like I saw someone do a rubbing off of a grave to get something, and they had one of the players do it, and then they set down that piece.
Oh, cool.
So it was a really ornate thing, but it was clearly a rubbing, and they're like, oh, I just did that.
Yeah.
So it was a representation of what a player had already done. They had planned for it. You know, another thing that's good is food and drink that is appropriate to the scene. If you're having a feast, why not have a feast?
Oh yeah, I've done that before. I bought a bottle of wine for the big dinner. With
yeah,
the
so
count.
there's a toast, and those kind of things are great. Another thing that I think it really does well for is we play in a vacuum in a lot of ways that we don't see that there are individuals who need assistance.
Sure.
I mean, there are plenty of people out there who have needs to be able to be accommodated, whether it be tactile needs, whether it be auditory needs, visual needs, memory assistance.
Sure.
Or just the simplicity thing is culture block. Like, they might not have a clue of what you're talking about.
Right.
Because they're not culturally attached to that in any way.
What's a cistern?
God. There's a name for that. It's called a cistern. But those kind of things can definitely be helpful in making things connect with others. So
I think that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. So the second thing I think is really important about props is that it makes it brings the object into an interactable space for you.
Yeah.
Okay. And now it sounds like that's the same thing, but it's not. So like, how many of you guys out there, and this question's also for you, Rob, how many of you have given a valuable plot object to a character? Something that's, you know, there to drive the story, maybe the thing that they need to beat the bad guy or something like that, and they jot it down on a note and then stuff it in a pack, and it gets disappears instantaneously. And then when they're fighting the last guy, they're like, oh god, this guy's really tough. If only we had this thing. Didn't we get that thing like 4 games ago?
Rifle.
Oh crap, guys, you know.
Or worse yet, the person who has it doesn't have that pack sheet because they forgot it, or their character sheet got botched in somewhere in between.
Yep, exactly. So if they have a physical thing sitting right in front of them, it becomes a lot harder for them to forget that it exists, you know? I would also say, too, that it encourages role play with the object.
Very much so.
Because, again, if you describe it to them and it is not a physical object, they may just jot it down and be like, oh, okay, it's a thing. It's another entry on my inventory list. It goes in the bag of holding.
Yep.
But if you're sitting in front of it, they can... Sometimes it's difficult to role play into a vacuum, you know?
Yes.
It's difficult to just pretend like an object is there and like it exists and it's of some importance, even if it is something that is, you know, big and memorable.
Yeah.
You know, being able to physically hold it and react to it and hand it to another player and point to it, and you know, these are all kind of role-playing cues. It makes role-playing about and around the object a lot easier to do.
Right. And sometimes it gives them a physical memory to reattach to it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that later on, if they're like, hey, wait a second, I think I have that note from the Duke. Rifle, physically pulls out the note. Here it is, you know, and they'll want to keep it.
They can reread it at any time instead of having to, like, what did that note say again? And now you've got to dig through your notes to find where you jotted it down 3 chapters ago.
Right,
you know?
Exactly. And not everyone is great at keeping physical notes of their own.
Exactly. And I think the last thing, too, is it makes discovery a physical activity.
Very much so.
So did you? I remember one of our Patreons, Sparkle Motion's a good friend of ours,
yes,
in real life, and she has this puzzle box
mm-hmm.
that's like got all these like subtle sliding panels on it
mm-hmm.
that you have to kind of like do in the correct order to get the top to slide off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it's just the coolest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that always comes to mind when I think of like puzzle boxes and stuff like that. If you found one of those things and handed it to your players, you might not want it to be like the thing they need to resolve the plot.
Right.
Because maybe they don't get it open, but it might be a neat bonus that if they do, there's like a potion inside or something.
Right, right. I mean, I literally had a situation where it wasn't a D&D game, but they were using bar puzzles
mm-hmm.
as breakpoints. So you had to beat the bar puzzle, and if you beat the bar puzzle, it gave you basically a critical move forward in the game. And I'm like, that's a cool way of doing it.
Like those interlinking iron rings where you've got to like they're like weird shapes.
Get the ball
and you've got to, like,
out
turn them at weird angles and stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, those are neat.
Things like that. So if you know them ahead of time, you're like, oh crap, I can help out here.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you props will give you an additional point to that. A thing that I learned when doing outside of gaming completely, when doing training, was if you're in a room full of people who are doing training with you, giving them physical objects that they're not used to while you're doing the training for people who are tactile learners
mm-hmm.
helps them. So there may be documentation in front of them or a computer that they may or may not be doing anything with while they're watching a section of learning, but if they've got a ball in their hand or something that they can play with, their brain pulls that data in differently. And that's another way to keep those memories fresh in people's minds
mm-hmm.
versus falling asleep while playing D&D.
Absolutely.
Or messing around on their phone or something else.
I've always been that person who has to fidget when I'm listening.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly I doodled.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, absolutely. I am that person where unless I've got a pen and a pad of paper in front of me,
mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be able to absorb everything you've got.
Yep. Yep.
Lastly too, like with props too, with the physicality of them
mm-hmm.
is you can introduce clues that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hand them the lion crest key.
Mm-hmm.
That has the lion engraved on the head of it,
mm-hmm.
and then like 4 sessions later, when they come across this mysterious door with a lion's crest carved on it, they're
mm-hmm.
like, I know how to open the door.
True.
And that's gonna be a moment, like all because you found at some cheap thrift store for 50 cents some little antique key, and you were like, oh, this is neat. And you can just drop it in front
mm-hmm.
of your players. Now all of a sudden they've got this great epiphany moment where they're like, the lion crest key,
Mm-hmm.
It's so great. It's so great when you have those moments at your table. So
'Tis true.
All right, do's and don'ts of props.
Let's get the do's done.
Props are wonderful to use,
mm-hmm.
but boy howdy, can you make some mistakes with these things?
Well, let's start with the do stuff.
All right.
I think the do's are better because when we get to the don'ts are going to be hard.
The don'ts are going to be harder. All right, so do's.
Okay.
Do shop for fun things at thrift stores, antique shops, garage sales, other places with old, cheap stuff.
Go to Halloween USA after Halloween. And for 20 to 50% off, pick up things that would be neat.
You can find so much cool stuff for literally pennies to the dollar.
Yeah, I liked the Pier 1 outlet store because you could find boxes and neat little mirrors and keys and all kinds of fun stuff there as well.
Hell, I thought Pier 1 was a little bit expensive,
Well, I mean, you do the outlet and it's pretty darn cheap.
Oh, yeah.
And you can find stuff in their clearance sections, even like bottles and things like that, which really are fun.
Estate sales are also cool because, not to put it too crassly, but that usually means like an old person has died and old people have old stuff. Like
that
antiques.
is often true.
And old antique stuff is usually very ornate.
Yes.
And easy to introduce into your D&D games.
Very much so. I another thing you can sometimes find at estate sales is old books, old albums and stuff that are the leather bound but don't have any label, like they don't have anything on them, and you can repurpose the book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
and that way you can hand people tomes of knowledge and then literally just put a page at certain points so they notice there's a difference and they can page through to that. and it makes for reading books different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Sam in our live chat, one of our Patreons, says she's super excited to use the skeleton keys she bought and wrapped gemstones.
ooh.
And then she also says Etsy and small businesses on Twitter. Those can be expensive sometimes.
Yeah.
But you can find some really unique stuff there. So
I would say so too.
keep the option open, but obviously use your discretion on the pocketbook.
Yeah, I would. And the other thing is a lot of times you'll find people who have abundance of things, especially after weddings and stuff. Like the glass beads they might have used as a centerpiece. Small mirrors. Things like that you could ask them, like, hey, can I get a couple of those from you or something like that for a couple bucks? They're often fine with that. The other thing is as much as a lot of people don't like necessarily doing it, there are a lot of manufacturers who make like that you can pick up. I think it used to be like a party magazine where you could get plastic coins. You get a bag.
Oriental Trading Company.
Thank you. Yes. And you could get coins. You can get gems, little jewels, and all kinds of stuff for pennies on the dollar, really. And those kinds of things go over great when you have to fill a chest full of coins and gems.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Hell, even use the chocolate coins.
Yeah.
I think Knox in the live chat brought that up earlier. Something about chocolate coins, and I'm like, yeah, actually that worked great. Like box full of treasure, and you get to eat it later.
That's right.
So it doesn't go to waste. And it kind of leads us to item number 2 is if you're not going to buy things all together, don't be afraid to get crafty.
Yep.
There's a lot of easy props that can be made at home with just basically what you've got lying around.
Yeah.
Paper with and a printer with a handwritten font, instant handwritten letter. Add some tea bags, some candle wax, and a decorative spoon handle. There's a tutorial I saw.
Yep.
And you can wax seal it.
Yep. Very much so.
And there's all sorts of things you can do. There's a ton of great tutorials up on YouTube. If you haven't realized it yet already, YouTube is like the greatest learning resource because it's just so many free videos.
There's a guy who does papercraft terrain that I follow, and if you're not a terrain person, you can make a whole dungeon in a matter of an hour and a half with a glue stick, a printer, and some cardboard. And it's amazing. It comes out beautiful, and it's very functional, and counts very much as stuff. And there are people like that who do that papercraft stuff, and you can make really neat things with papercraft, like really neat things for very simple ways with just simple folding, a little bit of gluing.
Absolutely. Now, make sure you test out your props first. Always make sure you test out your props first. The sealed letter that I was just talking about is no good if the sealing wax leaves part of the note illegible. And the decorative box that you mean to put treasure in is useless if you cannot unlock it.
Very true. Or if it's too big. Another thing you need to be careful of is if you're getting stuff that's older or that is secondhand, clean it up a little bit, because sometimes especially if you're not the house where the game is happening, or if you're taking it somewhere, you can end up leaving oily residues,
musty props, spider eggs on the inside.
Exactly.
It's awful.
Just take some time to do some cleanup on those things. And be careful of edges and things. There could be like screws sticking out that you didn't necessarily notice. So take your time.
Put that on your friend's table, and then all of a sudden they've got a big gouge in it.
Or worse yet, someone gets poked by it.
Right.
Yep.
Let's see here. Make sure that you're using props to enhance your storytelling, not the other way around.
Yes.
Think of props like a seasoning, okay? Sprinkle it into your story where they can really bring out the flavor. If you add too much, you ruin the dish, and it becomes the only thing that anybody can taste.
And the other thing about it is just like your narration. Think of background music as part of that narration. It's just it's fill, it's creating the ambiance. But if I bring a prop into the scene, that prop is a Chekhov's gun. It needs to be important.
Yes.
I don't want to just fill the scene with candles and books and stuff unless it's part of the ambiance of the scene. But if I hand something to the players, if I deliberately put something in before them, it is important.
Yes.
And that's the way that needs to be played. Because if every letter they receive, regardless of who it's from, is written on a scroll and handed to them, they're just going to ignore them. They're going to read through them, but it's going to become second nature.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if some of the notes that you send them are digital, and you're like, okay, here's a copy of this, you have it. But then, like, the marquee sends a invitation to a party, and you send it, and it's got a scent on it, and it's sealed. Like, suddenly, people around the table are like, I'll be taking that, thank you. You know,
Right.
That's addressed to me.
or even if you do hand them, handwritten notes all the time, so they do have a physical record of it. When you hand them this one, it is on a fine vellum with a ornate wax seal and a ribbon, and it is scented and gold leaf around it.
It's in a custom envelope,
otherwise known as "you went to the stationery store for this one."
Exactly.
I tripped to Office Max.
And I will say this. Then it's the last thing in the do's, I guess, is to make sure you're not harming anybody at the table.
Yes, that's the big one.
There are a lot of things that you should do in preparing for it, making sure that your players can accept what you're about to present, whether it's you put a strobe in the corner, or you have a fog machine, or a specific scent that you're doing. Think about your players first and how they're going to accept this, and whether or not there's a question about it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's better to ask ahead of time if something like that is if someone's going to have an allergy or an adverse reaction or anything like that to something like that. It's better to quote unquote ruin the surprise and to make sure everybody at your table is safe and comfortable than to potentially put somebody in at best a discomfort situation, at worst in the hospital.
Yeah. Because you didn't realize they were allergic to mushrooms, and you made a stew. Yeah.
Or they were allergic to lavender or something like that, and you decided to use some incense or something like that. So just make sure. And obviously, we'll get to that. We're getting into the don'ts.
We're getting into the don'ts. There's a lot of don'ts, and this is where we kick off the don'ts.
Yeah, this is a good segue into the don'ts.
So number 1, do not use weapons. A weapon is never a signature piece. I mean, if you're doing a gumshoe story or some investigational thing, maybe a gun is an important part of the story as a prop. But I mean, realistically, it is not something you should be bringing on a table, because it does set up a lot of questions, regardless of the reality of said firearm.
Yeah.
So, but weapons in general, swords, knives, things like that, you can make papercraft versions of things. You can make representations. There's no need to go into the physical nature of it.
Exactly.
And if you do end up doing something like that for a specific scene, for a specific reason, make sure everybody's aware of it well ahead of time.
Yeah. I mean, you could make an argument for something like a repainted Nerf gun or something like that.
Sure.
From maybe one of your cosplays or something. But, there's never any call to put an actual sword.
No.
Or a real dagger on the table.
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to play with it. Somebody's going to end up sad. And they're probably going to end up sad at the hospital.
Yes, exactly.
The second thing, though, and kind of going along with the whole public safety thing, is if you do play in public, make sure that anyone looking on won't get the wrong idea. Weapons are obviously one thing, but things like bloody clothes as a prop, or items of a sexual nature, if you're if you're telling a mature story, might be welcome while you're playing at home. But if you're out in public, if somebody could view those things out of context, it could raise a lot of questions, cause some panic, cause some alarm.
It definitely made for an uncomfortable gaming scenario when you're trying to, when you're invited to a space to be able to play it, especially like Vampire, and people show up in relatively racy, questionable clubbing outfits, and they're like, well, this is what vampires look like. Yeah, that's great, but we're also trying not to get kicked out of the cafe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We're not trying to make their cafe a different place.
If you're playing a World War II game, maybe leave your Nazi costume at home. Yeah. Also, why do you have a Nazi costume?
Yeah.
But, just think about these things. When you pick up a prop, think, if someone saw me holding this right now, what would they think?
In the context that we're going to do it. Now, on the other hand, there are a lot of times where you're playing in a specific venue that is designed for that. It's either a private venue, at which point you can push it, but remember that there's always going to be a venue master who's going to be the one looking out for everyone.
Exactly.
And that's the important part about those things. So...
We mentioned this kind of before, but it's worth reiterating. Don't use chemicals or flames without ensuring it's safe to do so first. I mean, candles are good props. They double as mood lighting.
Yeah, very much so.
But just want to make sure that, if you're putting open flames on a table that may be jostled by people covered in a bunch of paper and flammable books, that you're just being careful with those sort of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's also no reason why you can't go with some of the electric candles.
With the electric candles,
yeah,
exactly.
that look just honestly as good sometimes. So also don't add oils or incenses without people knowing it.
Right. Kind of goes back to the scents or the fog machine thing that we mentioned earlier.
Yep, very much so.
And then I think lastly, don't be afraid to take the props back into your possession. I mean, it can come across as a little mommy's confiscating your toys if you can't play nice with them. But sometimes you need to.
Puzzle boxes.
Yeah, especially interesting or interactive props.
Yep.
They can become a distraction very quickly. And if you find that the prop is becoming the focus of the storytelling and not your storytelling itself, maybe, they just need to just jot that down on your paper and you can take it back.
Yeah, exactly. Put it in a place that they can see it so you can return to it, but maybe not so much. And again, you have to know your players. You may find out that some of them are really bad at keeping things, even their own character sheets. Maybe it's better if you have a plot box that you bring every game session that has all the notes and everything in it so that they have it at the session. I know I've definitely had players over the years who, when they leave with whatever they have, sometimes they don't even remember to bring their dice.
Yeah.
Let alone their character sheets.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Knox actually brings up an interesting one here in the live chat. He says, also, things happen. Try not to bring personal items with meaning.
Very true. Very true.
Yes, I have that antique box that my grandmother made for me by hand. I'm going to use it as a prop, and then somebody drops it.
Or pour something on it. I've seen people who've used tarot decks in games, and bringing them out sometimes can get damaged. People can flex them or flip through them, and you're like, "Ooh, don't bend that," kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to remember that this is going to be in contact with a lot of people.
This kind of goes back to why I suggest looking at like garage sales and estate sales and thrift stores and stuff like that for your props, because if you paid 35 cents for something that didn't belong to you yesterday, chances are you don't have a lot of attachment to it.
That's very true. That is very true.
So, use it to enhance your storytelling and punctuate a moment in your game. But yeah, don't bring stuff you're attached to.
All right, unconventional props.
Unconventional props.
I like these. I like these.
So we give you a lot of good ideas about what props are. But there's different places you can take props here. One of my favorite ones of all time, though, is costumes.
Yes.
Now, I'm not talking I'm not a big cosplayer. Like, I'm not a cosplayer at all, really. I've done some costuming for, like, one con that I went to once. And I've done some LARP. But, ultimately, I think, like, just putting a little bit of costuming into your game can make it really, really fun. Like, you don't have to go full immersion. Nobody's asking you to wear a corset or anything like that, but... I've
done it.
Even just wearing a hat, or something like that is
like if you're doing a Western
emblematic,
piece, and you pick up a Stetson and you set it on, and you're like, "Howdy, y'all!"
Right, or maybe wear a vest with a pocket watch.
Sure, or a big star on it,
exactly.
to say when you're that person, and roll through it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the same kind of feeling as giving it a voice. It's giving it a visual to go with said voice.
Exactly. And I think it's one of the more overlooked props that can be more or less easily done. Again, you can look at a lot of like consignment shops, thrift stores, where you can get a lot of cheap clothing. For being crafty at home, if you have a sewing machine,
sure,
there are a lot of great tutorials online. If you don't already know how to sew, it might be a great way to learn. You might find this interesting to you.
On a side note, if you're gaming with some people, and as a player even, and you find that maybe your where your storyteller's places is a little cold, no reason why not to wear a cloak. Add a little flavor yourself. So that's where props as a player can
the
sometimes
blanket you can wear.
It's right. So there's no reason why, as a player, you can't bring your own, but don't overshadow your storyteller.
Right. And just, obviously make sure you're going to be comfortable sitting around in it for 4 hours.
Right.
Or longer, depending on how long you guys game.
Exactly. If you're doing it digitally and you guys have cameras, spice it up a little bit.
Yeah. Especially if you got like a green screen.
Oh, yeah.
For your Zoom calls or something like that. Make your background something thematic to your character. Could be pretty cool. Oh, shoot. No, I want to do that for Ravana.
Do people have craft prop making nights with RP elements? We used to do it for the LARPs. We would get together and do stuff like that. I've definitely done it for those. I remember doing it for Vampire. I remember doing it for Kanar.
But with RP elements, like you mean like doing it in character?
I mean, we did it. I remember doing a few of those. We crafted some things that weren't necessarily real, but we did. Like, I mean, at the LARP, we built walls.
Yeah.
We built, we made, resurrection areas and things like that. I think with the Vampire LARP, we actually had to do almost like a scavenger hunt.
Okay.
To pull together elements for a occult thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. It was interesting how we had to try and figure out what we were gonna, where we were gonna find everything we needed. And who we were gonna get it from. So yeah, I've done it both prior to game and in game, and I thought it was interesting. I was thinking it definitely with LARPs, it's a lot easier with. When you're building stuff together for a game session, there's something special about the storyteller doing it in private and presenting it as a surprise. Yeah, because
then you've got the reveal, you've got the prestige.
Yeah. But I mean, I will say that I've definitely done things with other storytellers between games.
Oh yeah,
when they weren't necessarily involved. I'm working with other people right now on my game where they're helping me 3D print things and we're designing things to make sure that it's there for when we can physically play.
Yeah.
In whatever many months that's going to be. But yeah, definitely. I would definitely suggest that, and it's good to have a stable of people who are not in your game, who are interested in gameplay, who can help you with these things.
Sure.
I think that's a great thing.
We've got plenty of, at least from a miniature painting standpoint, I've got a lot of friends who really don't play D&D that love painting the miniatures.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
So other unconventional props, sound effects.
Yes.
No, it's not traditionally a prop because props are typically something physical. But in this broad definition that we're using of things that you bring in that enhance your storytelling.
Yes.
I think sound effects are a great idea. Now we've talked a lot about like music, background music and stuff like that. It's pretty easy to do, and I would say pretty standard.
It's becoming much more.
It's becoming a lot more standard as we move further into the digital age.
Yeah.
But there's don't discount the like there are a lot of soundboards out there.
You can put on your phone and just play.
Yeah, if
you're
you
sitting
need an
around.
Explosion or a scream or a clap of thunder or something like that, they're on demand right there for you. So.
Yeah, and there's good programs for that as well for PC where you can link it in and have it be added into your microphone for Discord, and that helps a lot.
I remember the intro to one of our games. I was describing a scene where your wife's character was up on watch all night, and there was a storm rolling in over the sea.
Yes.
And I said, you look out and you see the flash of lightning, and you begin counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and I had the sound effect queued up.
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
It will be here soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the narration went on, but I think that was a great moment. I kind of saw everybody at the table go like, "Oh,
storm's coming in."
Oh,
yep.
That was nice. There was real thunder there, guys.
Yep. It's a fun, brief thing, and again, it's a part where less is more.
Yeah.
Where if you've got something very subtle in the background going on, for instance, like they're in a cave or they're in an old cathedral that's fallen apart and is in derelict, and you've got little drips and kind of hollow sounds and wisps, and then you do like a door creaking open. Everyone at that table will suddenly go quiet because they're like, what the hell was that?
This is what the Mad Elf is really good at. We were talking about his storytelling style and how he'll just we're playing Mouse Guard, and he just puts on just some bird sounds, and we're like, oh, it's nature. Wait, those are crows. Wait, those are crows.
Yep, exactly.
Crows eat mice. We're mice.
Yeah. I think Knox's next question actually fits really well with what we're going into, which is the lighting. So and he was asking if we ever decorate gaming areas for an event that's a session or a party or a holiday celebration. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I did it for 7th C at one point. I did some table decorations.
That sounds about right.
Because it was a celebration. But yeah, I've done it. I know you've played around with some minor stuff. But lighting is a huge way to do that, and it's a simple way of doing it.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, people would just change the bulbs in one room of their house, and have little lamps on and stuff. And we were in a club or something. And now with LED strips lighting, you can program those things live.
Yeah, those the Philips Hue lights and stuff like that, the smart lights.
There was a neat game that I was watching where the GM did a sub thing, and they went to the red alert like you put in here, and all the lights go red.
Yes.
And so it's darker, but everything's lit in red, and they're all like, "Oh man, this is creepy as heck." And they had little creaking sounds because they were underwater to go along with it.
Wow.
And he had sonar sounds going off at certain times, so it really gave the ambiance of the moment. There's something about caves and being in subs and things like that make you feel closed into it.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's really scary. They don't necessarily like that feeling.
Yeah, it's a lot of anxiety.
So you have to kind of gauge where you're at with those and give moments of pause where people can take a breather and then come back to it. So
yeah, absolutely.
So
going back to the sound effects one. I heard anecdotally, and I don't through the grapevine. I don't even remember where I heard it, so I couldn't even give you a point of reference. But someone was running a game of Paranoia at a con one time. And they had an air horn under the table. So nobody saw it or anything like that. And they were like, okay, well, the computer wants us to go into that yellow area over there, but none of us have yellow clearance.
Right.
But we have to get that thing.
Right.
And so they're like, well, who's going to sacrifice themselves to go in there? Because, of course, going into a area you don't have clearance for is you have to report for termination.
Right.
So... so one of the players draws the short straw or whatever, and he walks in there, and he's like, okay, I walk into the room, and the guy doesn't even wait for the cue. He just starts going, bah, 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 with the air horn. And everybody, of course, just starts, crapping themselves blind with panic, because it's right under the table. It's loud as hell.
Yeah.
And he just keeps going, and just looks him right in the eye, and with a straight face, just goes, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? You're hearing the siren. What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. I definitely remember moments like that with a couple of games where sirens would go off. And you're like, oh, the cops are here. Oh shit! Now we got to go do this other thing. We got to get the heck out of here because we can't affect it. Any of this stuff. So yeah, definitely sights and sounds make a huge difference, and it's a lot easier than it used to be.
It's a lot easier than it used to be, yeah.
But you can still do a lot with a little. Just remember that, change a bulb, one bulb in your house. If a Philips Hue bulb will make a huge difference. If you're doing stuff online, and you've got your camera, use that. Use just the lighting change of your own area will change the effects of things. Changing the lighting on a map is relatively easy, and you can, if you're not good at Photoshop and things, even if players, if your maps originally that you got was daylight, go in there, just change the color setting on it to a blue or a little bit more gray, and watch your players ooh, it looks spooky and creepy. Yeah, that's what it's meant to look like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot you can do there, and a lot of the programs that are out there for maps like VTT and stuff like that have some of those lighting settings, and so use that, to push yourself a little bit.
One of the things I always wanted to do, and by all means, someone out there who listens to this podcast should steal this idea and photograph it and send it to us. But I wanted to do either a Tron or a Cyberpunk themed game and use fluorescent paints on the minis.
Oh, nice.
And use a black light over the train.
Totally like that idea.
So you get everything glowing. Would be great.
No, I like that idea. That's pretty cool.
So, you want to get some questions?
Yes. About 10 minutes.
Yeah, about 12 minutes or so, yeah.
So let's start at the bottom.
All right, sure.
Overwatch says, what's one prop or physical aid that you've always wanted to use for a session, but never could because of cost, logistics, or effort? Wow.
I think that's my answer, actually.
Is that?
I've always wanted to use the blacklight models to do, like I said, some sort of a cyberpunk thing. My original plan was to do that Tron game set inside the computer, but then I didn't run it because I don't know crap about computers, and everybody I know knows more about it than I do. So
yeah. I think for me, it's more about the space itself. I wish I had a dedicated space that I could bring people into, that I could have lighting have the hue lights up, and have things preset so that I could just literally pull things into place, and suddenly now we're in this setting, kind of a thing. I like that idea. I like having a set, if you will.
It would be cool because like you can do like preset, because a lot of those things have software interfaces to them. The hue lights, we have some in our home.
Yeah, I've seen.
So especially with the LED ones that you can set to different colors, there is a software interface for them, and so it might be cool, just like you might change a musical cue or something like that, to change the lighting cue as a scene changes from one to the other.
Yeah,
and that way your entire room shifts with your storytelling.
And I've seen some people do some neat things with the Bluetooth speakers and or the Google Minis. Where you have like that one over there cued to play a howl. Well, this one over here is playing like a wispy wind.
So you get that 5.1 surround sound sort of environmental experience.
Yeah, and it's just as simple as hitting play.
Yeah.
And then when you're done with that scene, everyone takes 5, you queue up the next set, and you're ready to do something. But you could do that for a scene and really have a lot of impact.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
absolutely.
what I've always wanted. I've always wanted that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So. All right, your turn.
All right, so Hulavu asks us, I play in a game with a majority of college students. Not all of us have the disposable income. What are some cheap ways you know or have seen that can bridge the theater of the mind's eye and reality?
First things first, I always say there is absolutely nothing wrong with going to exceptionally cheap places and getting and scaling them up to what you need. The theater of the mind's eye's first step is it is the mind's eye, and you're taking one aspect out of it.
Yes.
Meaning, if you're handing somebody, like I was saying, like a book, you can find like used book sales that will have like an old book that doesn't have necessarily the name printed on the cover or on the spine, and then literally just glue into the pages of the book what you want on certain pages, and they'll know that those pages aren't part of the book because they're thicker, and they can page through it, and now you have a tome you can hand somebody. And that's a simple little thing that you can do for like $5.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seriously. Printing is not that expensive, and it's a huge step up. Use what you have. Use scents. Get a tea bag and tea stain stuff. If you're doing something as simple as like an old man, grab yourself a robe or something and throw it over you and hunker down at the table as you're talking to them, and now there's a visual representation of what's going on there.
Yeah, I think costume is usually pretty easy to do because, like I said, you can go to thrift stores and garage sales, when you see them, and you'd be amazed what you can find there for like literally 35 cents.
Yeah.
Sometimes even like I find it's actually the prop that begets the storytelling, not the other way around, where like you'll be looking at something, you may not even be there for prop shopping. You're like, oh, I was looking for a new dress or something like that, and you go to the thrift store and all of a sudden you see like, oh wow, oh man, that's a cool looking box. Oh, what if in that one part in my upcoming story I could do that,
Yep.
And suddenly you've got to walk out with this $2 box. And it becomes the next prop that you wrapped your story around.
Yep. So yeah, I definitely say that there are ways to do it. I would say don't be afraid to go less and grab some spray paint and paint something gold.
Oh yeah,
you need a golden chalice. Go get something inexpensive.
Go get a plastic goblet, plastic wine goblet from Target for $3.
Yeah, or less, and just spray paint it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Glue some plastic gems from Michaels on it that you can get for.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can get at Target.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Also, kids aisles are great for that kind of shit.
Hot glue gun. Oh yeah,
Kids aisles, you can get away with a lot of neat stuff.
Kids aisles, you can get away with a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And lean on YouTube. For tutorials a lot. There's a lot of cool stuff up there that they'll teach you how to do it for cheap and free. All right. So the Mad Elf asks, what is the limit on props, as in elaborate or realistic? I don't think there is a limit. Is there really?
I think you can go too far. You can use too much.
You absolutely can.
And that can get problematic. Because the last thing you want to do is overwhelm people.
Yeah.
You less is more when it comes to the physical props. I think where you can gain is lighting, clothing, ambiance, sound, but the physical props themselves, less is more.
Yeah, I think your props are going to basically fall into two different categories, and that is, like you said, your ambiance, and your like plot item.
Correct.
And so I think you can lean on the ambiance quite a bit, up to the point where it starts becoming a LARP.
Yes.
So, and keep in mind that this is all time consuming and energy consuming to plan and plot all this stuff together too. So, you may not even have the energy to constantly run, a full soundtrack with sound effects and costuming and lighting changes. Like, that's basically a one-man show at that point. It's not, you're not even role-playing anymore.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of has its own inherent limit in just, like, how much energy do you want to realistically throw into this for what payoff? But also, how many plot items do you have that you need of, items of great significance to give to your characters? And I think your story dictates that, I think there's maybe, like one or two particularly important plot items that I might have a prop for you for my game, but that's stretching it.
Yeah, and realistically, I think it goes a long way to say that your plot beats help determine that as well.
Yeah.
So if you're, a lot of people will say it's based on scene, a lot of people say it's based on the story section. But if you're in a story, within the story circle, you should probably only have one, maybe two plot items for that story circle so that you're not flooding them with information.
Right.
Where they start at a point, whether it's the town, they go and start looking for something, they find it, they have to deal with a situation, they return different. That circle of events needs to be very simple.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you and I play enough video games to know that, like, sometimes we log on and we're like, inventory management.
It's terrifying.
You never want to have your actual physical player characters be like, I have to manage inventory. Like, where am I going to put all these props? At that point, you've gone too far.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Let's see here. Knox in the Box asks, any safety tips about certain popular props or ideas? Something that sounds good on paper but can be tricky to execute. Perhaps something that may trigger seizures, for example, or maybe handling potentially dangerous items. I think we touched on a lot of this.
Yeah, I think if you're not comfortable with candles, go with electric candles, or alternative lighting like light bulbs.
Anything you're aerosolizing into the air can be a potential asthma.
It sounds easy, but be careful of incense.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to, like, essential oils and stuff, there are some things that just animals can't deal with. So if the place where you're going or the people around you might have animals, be careful. Yeah. Because that can affect them, and in a very poor way. I
don't really have like a scent allergies or anything like that, but there are certain scents that just burn my nose, and I'm sure they smell perfectly nice to other people, but they're like, it's almost like that cilantro effect, you know?
It's too much.
But
Yeah, so just be mindful of your group and of the space that you're in, because it may sound like a cool idea to bring a fog machine in, but your 10 by 15 room suddenly is now full of fog. And no one can see their character sheets, and some people can't breathe.
I cast obscuring mist.
Yes, you did. So I would say beyond that, I mean, you're pretty solid to try things, but just maybe run some of it by other people in your group.
Yeah. Like I said, it's probably better to spoil the surprise and make sure that everybody's comfortable and safe than to have a potential incident.
Exactly. So, all right. Next week, we are going to be getting back to our mini-series, and we're going to be discussing not-so-random encounters.
Not-so-random encounters.
And I think that it should be fun, because I don't think random encounters really exist anymore. Or they shouldn't.
I don't know.
All right.
You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. You can listen to us live every Wednesday night on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave, and that's at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And also, join us up on our Discord. We'd love to have you join the discussion. You can shoot us show questions there, engage with the rest of the community, whether you're a new storyteller or an experienced storyteller. We'd love to have you up there. You can find the link to our Discord on our website at storytellerconclave.com or up on our Twitter. We tweet it out pretty regularly as well.
Yep. We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially our named members, Nox, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, and Sparkle Motion. We really appreciate all of you and your help that you give us in keeping this all going. Feel free to join us so you can join this live chat. Our pre-show music today was by a variety of artists, so I will be putting those up on link for those who are interested. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. And our outro music is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/treks.
And as always, a big shout out to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for supporting us.
Thank you.
All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables and gamed with us over the years, and every single one of you, our listeners. We love you.
Love you guys.
Good night.
Good night.